Okay, we are recording. This is David P. France, and I'm coming to you from Basel, Switzerland. And before we get started, I want to ask of you guys who are listening and watching the video to like, to subscribe to the YouTube channel, and actually to share as well. The David P. France TV is growing. We got a lot of great videos and interviews that we'd like more people to see. So if you could do that, it would be great. This evening, I am speaking with Darnell Stephen Summers. He's currently living in Berlin, Germany. And Darnell is a musician, a filmmaker, and a Vietnam vet. And Darnell, you and I met through a colleague, well, it's actually a friend of yours, someone that I recently met in the last couple of years here in Switzerland. And we had a conversation, a conference call conversation. I just thought it was very interesting, and I wanted to have this interview with you to introduce you to the people that, that watch our videos and explain kind of your background, what you're up to now, what you were up to many years before. And first, before we start, we're going to say that Darnell is from Detroit originally, born and raised in Detroit, right?
Yeah, and then my parents moved to a suburb just right outside of Detroit called Inkster, so I have to give them some props too.
Yeah, no, you guys
exactly.
Shout
so,
out.
In fact, that's where the movie where I did my first movie was in Inkster, Michigan, which incidentally is the second to last stop on the Underground Railroad.
How do you pronounce it again?
Inkster.
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 Now the people, I know a lot of people from Detroit, so they already, I had to open up with that because as soon as they hear that, it's like a big, and I know that you guys are, you have a very strong community in Detroit.
That's right.
Say, right? It's very strong.
Yes, sir.
Well, tell us about, who you are, what you've been doing. I know a lot more than the audience knows, but I mean, the fact that you are, as you say, you were born in America, or you were born in the United States, and you managed to live in Berlin for, over 20 years, you'd say, right? Or Germany?
20, well, in Germany over about 45 years, actually.
Oh, 45 years?
Yeah.
In Berlin?
20 years.
20 years.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about yourself and your upbringing, your background, so we can get a snapshot, and then we can move further into
it. As a documentary filmmaker, you do a lot of reflection and research, and quite naturally, I'm interested in my family. When I was a young boy, I used to talk to my grandmother a lot because she used to come and stay with us, right? And when I got old enough to be, sort of aware of a few things, one time I asked her about slavery. Mm-hmm. And this strange look came over her face, It was like she stopped for a minute. Everything kind of like just was in suspended animation. And she looked, and it was like she wasn't there. And she looked at me and she said, "Stephen, the way they treated those women." Now, I couldn't process that at that moment where she said it to me. I knew it was something significant. I knew she was saying something that was heavy, but I couldn't process it. Now, quite naturally, over time, and experience and delving deeper into the question, you knew what that meant. And like right now, I see your face. I saw your face when I said that. And automatically, you knew exactly what I was talking about. And it's right. And that question, is part of what's happening today, what's unfolding today on the question of Black Lives Matter, and then the whole history, the 400-year history of oppression and slavery, and all that is coming to the fore now. So as a filmmaker, especially as a documentary filmmaker, you have a tendency to look to the past. You're in the present making it, and then people are talking about the future. Tomorrow I'm gonna do this or whatever. So you get the whole shot. And as a child, I was very inquisitive. I grew up in Detroit, the formative years of my life. And I was thinking today about this conversation that we were going to have, that we're having right now. And I was thinking about, quite naturally, my first experience with the police, quite frankly, was a beautiful experience, because I was in the first grade and they came with the traffic cop, you know. He had on the, rider pants, he had on the black boots, he had the hat on with the white covering on it, and he was there to protect us, telling the children how to cross the street and all of that, And so my initial contact with the police was, was good, So I just wanted to kind of like tie that in there. I went to a Catholic school. First it was Our Lady of the Rosary, then later on it was Blessed Sacrament, from which I graduated. Then I went on to high school and I graduated from a Catholic high school, St. Francis Xavier, which happened to be in a suburb of Detroit called Ecorse. And there were only two people in the two black people in the graduating class.
Well, I can imagine.
Well, it wasn't always like that, because they had some schools like St. Cecilia and a couple of other schools that had a larger black student, people within the student body. So, but I had the other extreme, and in fact, I have a project, and it deals with that, because I went to the 50th anniversary of our graduation in 2015, and I call it Frozen in Time, and I learned a lot about being in high school and what happened to the people afterwards. We have a person that's on the wall in Washington, D.C., Philip Tank, who died in Vietnam at the same time that I was there, and very painful stuff, And so anyway, I grew up in Detroit. I went to Detroit Conservatory of Music, then later on to Michigan Conservatory of Music with my brother Bill Summers, who was a very famous musician, playing with the Headhunters, Michael Jackson. He was in on the music he helped write the music for Roots and The Color Purple. We could do a thing just on him, So maybe you'll be interested in that interview, which would be very interesting anyway. But, so I grew up there and went through all of the things that a black male would go through living in a big city in America, some of it good. Go on.
And what kinds of, for example, give us an example of the types of things that you were going through, things that come to your mind right now, back during those times, things that you can recall right off the top of your head.
Well, your father's going to talk to you and tell you how to act when, you stop by the police. That was obligatory. That has a long tradition, back to slavery, whatever. I can remember they called the police on myself and a boy by the name of Benny Belk, my next door neighbor, who went on to be a police sergeant in the Detroit Police Department, right? But they stopped both of us at a department store called Demery's and lied and say that we were cutting up some shirts. That was a traumatic experience, having the police come down to the store, having us, being detained. And I couldn't have been any more than 11 or 12 years old, but what was good about that was that my parents, my mother was irate and went, and told these people, told them off, that, no, my son doesn't do this and Benny doesn't do this either. There was one police unit called the Big Four, and the head of the Big Four was called Rotation. I was walking down the street. They had a 4-door sedan. And when they got out, it was doom 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 doom. With the doors.
Sure.
What I'm saying? So yeah, I'm walking down the street home from grade school. And they called me over to the car, just messing with me. So these kind of things are happening. I'm beginning to hear about, people being beaten, people being shot, all of these things are happening. Then of course, there are a couple of iconic moments in history for Black people, one of them being Emmett Till. Now, I'm born in 1947, and I think the Emmett Till thing was either 52 or 53. I remember the discussion. I remember that. I remember it well, you know? And so that made a mark. I didn't, as a child, you don't understand everything, but you know that something is wrong. You know, when the parents start talking intently, when the name just keeps repeating itself, you know. So that would have been another moment, you know. Then you start seeing, I would see the pictures of lynchings. I don't know how I saw them, but I saw them. You know, they used to have postcards and stuff, you know. So
postcards. So where would you find the postcard? Like would they like out in stores or shops?
You'd see them. You might see them in a book. You can go to the internet now, and they'd have a lynching. The photographer would be there. He would take the picture, right? And they put it on a postcard. It's well documented. It's there.
Hey, look.
I'm not saying you're doubting that. I'm not saying that. But
look, you guys. Before we started the interview, right? I was telling Darnell that I had been really revisiting a lot of these issues just by virtue of what's happening in the United States, what's coming up on the phone, right? So I knew that our conversation was gonna, maybe subconsciously, I was preparing myself because I knew this information was gonna be that would come up. Did your family come from the South and move to Detroit at some point, like maybe grandparents or even further back? How did you guys get to Detroit?
Well, my whole family's from Louisiana.
Right, that's what.
So we're right on the go.
About this, right?
You know, you got to go to Florida.
The migration kind of goes like this, right?
Right.
Goes up like this.
You know,
so you're originally from Louisiana. What part of Louisiana are you from?
A place. My father's from Darrow, Louisiana, and right across the Mississippi is Donaldsonville. An interesting note of history here is that Donaldsonville used to be the capital of Louisiana, and then they moved it to Baton Rouge.
Baton Rouge. And I told you that I spent significant time in Louisiana, right? In New Orleans.
You look Louisianan.
No. But I spent time there. I spent time there. I spent time there. So that's a whole nother thing. So do you guys, your family moved there because of the industry that was happening in Detroit? Like a lot of people were moving up there around that time.
Father moved or migrated to Detroit during the war. He was in the war, and then he got a medical discharge. I don't know how long he stayed in, but I have a picture of him that I'll send to you. And in 1943, and he got a job at Great Lakes Steel. In fact, he was the first Black man to be hired at Great Lakes Steel. That was also, there were several rebellions in Detroit. One in 1941. There was one in the 20s that people don't talk about. And probably some other ones also. But there was one in the 20s that I don't know that much about, but 1941, 1943, and 1967. My mother told me many times that she did not want her children to grow up in the South. That wasn't even a question. She wanted to come up to the North and at least have, that gorilla off of her back, that out and out, straight up, racism, and it was horrible. But we're getting ahead of the story here.
Right, we're sure.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you real quick. When I was in New Orleans, there were certain parts of the city, like I never ventured outside of the campus, Tulane's campus. But there were times that I did, and when I did, I would see remnants of the segregated past. I mean, it was easy for me to see. In one particular part of New Orleans, which is that there was an unofficial demarcation. So if you lived south of this particular street, you were white, right? And the property values were higher and they were more elevated. And if you lived on the other side, it was mostly Black.
Right.
And as the real estate started to change, that line started to how do you say, be whittled away, but actually moved up further, right? So the property values started to go higher, a little bit more above the line. So in other words, the racial line changed.
Well,
Right.
also probably the elevation too.
The elevations, now the highest parts of New Orleans were all mostly white, right?
Yeah, of course.
The
The Negroes lived in the swamp.
the Negroes lived in the swamp. That's right.
I'm being nice
you know,
about it.
below like where the flood lines.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So you guys, you came up in Detroit, and you went to fairly, you know, prestigious schools. It sounds like. I mean, your parents really did a lot of work to make sure you guys got educated in a certain way.
Of course, yeah, but in fairness to my mother and my father, my mother was a very intelligent woman. You know, well read. I used to. Have you ever heard what's his name? Frank Yerby.
No.
You see, you never heard of. He's a black writer.
Look, I've heard of a lot of black writers. I have not heard of Frank Yerby. So if you can tell me who he is.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you who he is, because this is interesting for your viewers, because a lot of these movies, these swashbuckler movies that you see, you know, he wrote them. You know, Saracen Blade, Errol Flynn played in some adaptations from his books. He wrote these historical novels, you know, and I mean, very well made, very gritty, very sensual, very erotic, right? You know, well, maybe not erotic by today's standards, you know what I'm saying?
Dangerous books. Dangerous. Dangerous back then, right? Or once.
I mean, you know, but well respected. You know, people were adapting them for Hollywood. Now, just imagine. Here's this Frank Yerby. He's a black writer. Everybody knows it, and people saying, "Yeah, man, let's make a movie with this." You know what I'm saying? My mother's reading these books. Now, I could read and write before I went to school. In fact, when they put me in the first grade, they suggested that I go to the third. So, but my pediatrician, Dr. Douglas, he said no. He said that wouldn't be a good thing. I was mad at him for years, you know, but he was a great guy. So, but I was reading her books. Now, let's say I had the rudimentary skills of reading. I wasn't reading Shakespeare at 5. Okay, let's get that straight for anybody who's up there saying, yeah, sure. All right. But by the time I got to be 7, 8, 9, you know, I was checking the stuff out really deeply, thoroughly. So I'm reading Frank Yerby, you know, and one I remember is the Saracen Blade, which somebody made a movie. Ricardo Montalban is in it. You know Ricardo Montalban?
Yeah, of course, you know him. We know him.
Okay, so he's in this movie, Saracen Blade.
Only because of Fantasy Island, and then anybody that liked him had to do the research back, right? So of course I knew who he was.
Yeah,
only because of TV, but during those times, at least in the, you know, when they would bring these artists or these actors from this era when they were like the thing, because Ricardo Montalban, I'm only going on people that my parents would talk about, right? So he was somebody that around, and he was a big deal, right?
He was a big deal, right? You know, he's Latin lover, you know, they cast him as a Latin lover, you know. So I'm reading these books, right? And man, my heart's throbbing. My whole body is shaking. This is my first introduction to sensuality, you know, to a certain extent. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And saying, wow, well, I didn't go through all of this then, but in retrospect, when I think about it, it had a lot to do with the way I viewed certain things. You understand? You know, I wasn't confused about anything. I mean,
it made a big impact.
It made a very big impact. And then I never discussed this with my mother. I didn't dare. I left that alone. You know what I'm saying? And you know, growing up, And we were talking about my mother and
That's right. We're talking about in Detroit and how, I
Yeah.
mean, in other words, you guys aren't slouches. I mean, it was like you, and the thing that's familiar as you're talking, because I know a lot of people from Detroit. What I sense from people in Detroit is that because of the industry, there was that people were able to make it, meaning they were able to migrate from the South to Detroit,
Mm-hmm.
make money, buy homes, do things that you know uh, were really difficult for maybe
Mm-hmm.
people in other parts of the country. I'm not sure if this is true or not, but it seemed as if the industries needed you guys because it was growing so quickly, and they needed people on assembly,
Of course, of course, of course.
right? So
You
the
know,
impact, I could feel that when I met people from Detroit. I knew that there was a level of not education, because that's not what I'm talking about, but a sense of like knowledge
mm-hmm.
about who they were and where they came from, and no apologies for that. They knew who they were. Most of the people that I
Exactly.
met before have this sort of sensibility.
Right. You know, the school system,
Yeah.
until it deteriorated, was top notch. I mean, for
Right.
public schools, I didn't go to a public school. I went to public school during the summer, to
Mm-hmm.
summer school. I went to school year round. My mama made me go to school year round, but going to the summer school meant I could get a car, you know, and meet some girls, and so it was a social thing too. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Going to summer school, but the system, because it used to be predominantly white or
Mm-hmm.
to serve the white community, it
Mm-hmm.
was top notch. They had everything. It was wonderful schools. The buildings were wonderful. They were institutions. They were like colleges, or like at the very least, junior colleges.
Mm-hmm.
When you just looked at it, it was like it was university. Just in terms of the facilities that were there available to you. And after black people, after the white flight, everything started going down.
Right.
But there again, we're back to my formative years, and we're already in my teenage years right now. But
Well, I'm going to ask you another question real quick. When
may
you
I blow
talked
my
about your
nose?
mother, when you talk about when you talked about your mother, and she said it was really bad what they did to those women.
That
I
was my
mean,
grandmother.
that was your grandmother.
Yeah.
What exactly was she alluding to? Did she go into detail about what that period was or what happened during that time?
Well, she also said that she was walking across a bridge one day and saw a black man hanging from it.
Right. And this is in the South, in Louisiana.
In Louisiana.
In Louisiana.
And so you see your question.
Mm-hmm.
You asked me that question in 2020, with all of this going on, with people demanding that this blatant racism have an end, and yesterday, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we put it in context, my grandmother, and this movement doesn't start, it doesn't drop from the sky,
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not talking about Malcolm X or Martin Luther King or Medgar Evers or a lot of other people, Huey Newton, just a lot of people in my era. I'm talking about the people who did not have the chance to, have things manifested where they could hands on, right? But they're part of the foundation. My grandmother was a militant. I know it in her heart. Because she made me one. Why do you tell a child these stories? And I'm doing the same thing today. I'm telling my son and my grandson and my granddaughters. I'm educating them to things that, in my way, that they probably would never hear in school. That's not to say you don't have revolutionary teachers or progressive teachers, that try to instill in their charges the same thing,
Mm-hmm.
But my grandmother instilled something in me, because as I said, when she told me the story, she became so intent so focused, you know. She told me the story about walking across the bridge and seeing the man hanging from it after the story about the women. And there could have been years between those two accounts, you know, but there was a steady, constant uh, probing, you know. So let me see how he's going to read. To me, this is all retrospect now.
But do you feel that, and you touched on this when we had conversations in the past,
Yeah.
do you feel that there's something that is being forgotten or lost in the current movement, which is manifested itself in Black Lives Matter, and in terms of what's happening currently with the younger people in the United States? From your vantage point, what is your take on that?
You know, I see a lot of me in them. Number one, you know, the impatience. You know, I told one, you know, I have filmed things, and I'm going to send you some of the rushes. And I was talking to a young lady from Albania. She's out there. You understand? You know, there's an immediacy about them. I don't give a damn where they're from. Her favorite poet was Maya Angelou.
Right.
She had a poster. You understand me?
Right,
she had a poster with Maya Angelou on. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
But that's a tribute to Maya Angelou.
Yeah.
You know, she made that happen. And this woman listened to this, right? And her favorite, you know who else her favorite was? And she had a picture of him. She had a double-sided thing. I'll send it to you.
She had a double-sided
poster
of
and on the front was Maya Angelou and Muhammad Ali.
Right. Okay. Sure.
Okay.
Yes.
You feeling me?
Yeah.
All right. On the other side, she had a pronouncement, F Trump. So she summed it up. You know, she just tied the knot. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, there again, back to the question of how I feel about them today, and the question of from whence that came. You know, 400 years. You know, I know there's somebody on that slave ship in the hole intellectualizing. Everybody's summing this shit up. Hey man, yesterday I was, you know, going to my grandma's house. Today I'm in the bottom of this goddamn, you know, this slave ship. You know, everybody's checking this. I've got a song. It's called Slavery. Heavy chains cut through my soul. The lonely past just won't let me go. Sad, dark faces screaming from the grave. Hey, stand in line, nigga, you still my slave. That's the first verse. You know, I kind of like visualized, you know, what they were saying, you know, and like screaming from the grave. See, they try to make it like, you know, we were some docile, ignorant, you know, facile creations, you know, we couldn't chew gum and walk at the same time. They like to give that image, but it wasn't true. And once you find out that that's not true, then your demeanor changes. My grandmother, you know, and I think about it, I get tears in my eyes, man, you know, because I wouldn't be who I am today without her. And the only thing I'm trying to stress here is that those who came before us, you know, didn't have, when we talk about what they couldn't do, we're not talking about the vote.
Right.
They couldn't live as human beings.
Right.
You know, you know, the way human beings should be able to live without stress, you know, without condemnation, without degradation, you know, strong people. So when I look at the kids today, I see me, you know, I see them because they're drawing the line. They're digging that line, you know, that line in the sand. That must be down to the core of the earth. You understand? That much, you know what I mean? That's a deep line, bro. It's a deep line. Yeah. So
is there, to draw it out even further, do you think that what they're doing, is there an impatience, or do you think that they don't have an understanding of this long process of the people that happen, or things happen to before, years and years before? In other words, is there something missing in today's protests?
The only thing missing with the young people is experience.
Uh-huh.
That's it. Now maybe some introspection. Whatever they don't have,
Mm-hmm.
they're gonna get.
Right.
And whatever they don't get, they don't need. That's my impression of that. And if I go back to this Albanian young lady, Muhammad Ali and Maya Angelou touched her in her soul. You understand? And they must have told her something. I didn't ask her. I didn't have time to ask her what she was reading, but what it filled a void. It filled a void, and it's filling a void with a lot. The reason I'm going back to the Albanian young lady is because people wouldn't think that this would be possible. Some people, and I think they're rather naive, because what they are talking about, and everybody knew. Muhammad used to say, "Everybody knows me.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody knows who I am," and he was right. He was right. They saw something beyond the box. He's a beautiful boxer, beautiful man. He was articulate. He was intelligent, right? But he stood for something also. You understand? And that's what inspired her and billions of other people around the planet. You understand? And with Maya Angelou, the intellectual, with Muhammad Ali also, the intellectual aspect too. There's no question. But these things touch people. They touch them like nothing else. And so there's whatever void there is being filled, by the people who are walking shoulder to shoulder with them, right. by circumstances, all of those things, all those things, aid in people having, developing an analysis, developing plans. But my favorite poster in the civil rights movement was, and I told these two young women, was freedom now. Now. Somebody wrote it on the poster. I didn't write it. Maybe I would have written it had I had the chance. Mm-hmm. But I looked at that, out of all the "we shall overcome," I never liked. I'm gonna tell you the truth.
You didn't like
hell with that. I ain't like that. I ain't feeling that. You know what I'm saying? Freedom now was my slogan. Why not yesterday? I'm in a play. It's called Wallenstein, eine dokumentarische Inszenierung, which just means a documentary adaptation. And in this play, because they interviewed me before they selected me for the play, they were asking me to talk about myself, and I talked about my father and how concerned he was about some of my activities, politically, And of course he's concerned because he knows, shit can happen, you know what I mean,
Yeah.
And so I have to say, in this, I must have said something. I didn't listen to the original interview, but I must have said something. Well, they said, well, you said this. You said, well, you questioned your father about why didn't he do something? Why didn't he do more? Why didn't he fight racism? Well, he was in his way.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
But hey, like I said, I think somebody said yesterday to me, this is not changing. They can't put this genie back in the box. It ain't gonna happen. People are serious. They're serious. Every day there's something going on. And more groups. Black Lives Matter is an organization. It's also a movement. Mm-hmm. Now that's unusual. You understand what I'm saying? You have you have the Black Panther Party. Well, you just, to a certain extent, you had a movement, but not like this. I'm in the place.
Yes.
I'm in the place where they had the largest demonstration outside of America was right here in this city. You could not breathe. You couldn't breathe in that spot. You understand me? You couldn't move. Mm. And these kids, I've got it. You'll see it.
So I'm gonna ask you another question that has something to do with your backgrounds. I think it's important, and I think, I just think it's important. You talked about, you watched one of the other interviews with friend and colleague of mine, Eric Williams.
Yeah, right.
And there are certain things about that interview that seem to, that you seem to connect with. One of the things that you talked about was that you knew your ancestral background, going back many, many times.
1526.
1526. Now, of course, that stayed with me because for a variety of reasons, but can you explain to us what about the interview, the conversation that I had with Eric, what was so intriguing for you about the conversation? And then give us more information about your family background and how that's related.
There's so many things. He addressed something, but I don't remember it.
It was the tone. It was the vibe, right? He had a vibe.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, see, I know that. We know that vibe.
Yeah, I've known him for years, and that's the same vibe he had. Like 30
years. Frequency. It's a frequency.
Yes.
It's one. What is it? 135 hertz. I don't know.
Right. He was.
Yeah, I got that. We got that vibe. Some of us have that vibe. And immediately you sync with that. You know what I'm saying? You're syncing with that. The Freedmen's Bureau?
Yes, I know of it. Yeah. Yeah, of course. Yes. Explain to the audience.
Well, around the time of the Emancipation Proclamation or shortly thereafter, couldn't have been too long. The Freedmen's Bureau was dealing with the freed slaves, and to some extent trying to integrate them into society, into the fabric of America after being enslaved for so long. And so there were many different things going on. It reminds me of the 30s and what Roosevelt did, in terms of having the Writers Guild and the photographers go out and photograph the people and interview the old slaves. But my brother sent me a document. And I thought I sent it to you, but nonetheless.
You may have, but I don't remember seeing it. A document
from the Freedmen's Bureau.
Uh-huh.
It's dated 1863, excuse me. 1863. And my great grandfather is being interviewed in this document. I want you to appreciate what it feels like. Well, it should feel the same way for you to a certain extent because he represents us all. Every slave that was interviewed represents all of us. I just happen to be related to him. You know what I'm saying? All right, if you feel what I'm saying. Of course, being personally is another quality, but it's not so far away from you feeling the same kinship to him and everyone else. And everybody should understand that, I don't get any special privileges because of that, He was a slave among many, I just happen to know his name, his offspring, and I'm one of them, okay? But to read what he had to say in the story of how the slave master was his grandfather, or his father rather, sold him to his brother, His brother was the ambassador to the French court, during the Civil War, all of these things, Kenner, Louisiana.
I know Kenner.
Yeah, they're my people. That land, that legacy was built by our people. I say our, not mine, our, and, just reading that will break your heart. What he had to say.
So this was, just to be clear, the person, the relative that was your great was a slave, but his father was the slave master and sold him to his brother. Is that
Right.
what you're telling me?
George Kenner. Right. Exactly. Sold him to his brother, Duncan Kenner. Right. Right. Exactly. You know, it's just a hell of a story.
Well, and in terms of you even talked about going back further from, like, I think, what is it, 15, the date
1526.
26. Now what?
That's the date that's on the family tree. Now, you know, they stopped, you know, maybe that's as far as they could go back. You know, I have my suspicions about before that, but I'm not sure, but I have suspicions.
Okay, so elaborate in terms of the date of 1526. And the reason why I'm focusing on this is this is my theory, right?
Yes,
and
sir.
I will share with you my theory.
All right.
And because a lot of us Black Americans, they call it, as the term is now developing or has developed, ADOS, African descendants of slaves, right? This is what this is what's coming up. Yeah. What I found is that a lot of the people, at least in Baltimore that I know of, they have these backgrounds of mixed heritage of slave owners and slaves.
Yeah, of
right?
course.
So for me, I didn't know this. I had to do my own research. My parents didn't tell me, right? So I had to do my own research. While I was in law school, I looked up information about Maryland. I looked up, my aunt did a lot of research in terms of DNA and found out some stuff. So in other words, what we thought we were probably, when I was younger, turned out to be much different. So much so that the person that we are actually related to was some judge or something in Annapolis, right? So,
so you the fruit didn't fall far from the tree.
Well,
with the lawyer thing.
Well, this is the thing I think is interesting, and this is what I at least want to, kind of bring out, is that I believe that all of the people that you are related to, and this is part of our issue that we're having in America, is that when slave owners were throwing their seed around, or people in privilege were throwing their seed around, literally they didn't necessarily think that the offspring would have anything to do with them, or have any traits, or have any kind of knowledge that was similar to what they were doing, right? So in other words, there are a lot of people who don't understand why they are the way they are, what makes them tick. And we now know that, your DNA and your code, your software, your human software, has a lot to do with that, right? So, it answered a lot of questions. That doesn't necessarily change who I am. It doesn't change. You just have more knowledge of who, the history of how you came to be. But what I think it does do is it gives you a firmer grip on how to navigate in the present time. Right. So if you don't necessarily, it's very similar when people don't know who their father is. Right. Like if you just don't know who your father is, and you're raised by one parent, and you're always searching, or if you're adopted, right, and you're always longing for, like, well, who am I related to? Right. Where did I come from? And I think that sheds light. I mean, so when I started talking, when we had the initial conversation, and you started talking about some things, and I said, well, for me, being from Baltimore, there is a kinship that I have with people from Detroit, because I think we had a similar development in terms of the city. So my grandfather worked for Bethlehem Steel, right? So and he, we don't know. I mean, we have pictures of my grandfather's father, but it's it gets a little murky. It gets murky. The more questions you ask, the murkier it sometimes gets.
Yeah, sure. Of course. It's real murky.
Yeah, it gets real murky. And as far back as at the time that I was home, there was something that was dropped that it was like for the first time. And, I'm, 53, right? So someone that we thought was someone who was around all the time, who we thought was just a family friend, was actually related He was actually related.
Hey, man.
You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah, of course.
it's really murky, but I think it's important
Yeah.
to shed the light on things like this, right?
Yeah.
Because on one end you have what happened to us in America, and it's still happening to us. But I think it gives it a different it gives us a different lens, right, from which to view what's happening to us now. That doesn't mean that we're better or different. It just gives us more information. Gives us more information. So
Let me
I
share
think
a
it's
little.
important. I think it's important.
Of course. On this tip, let me share another anecdote with you. My uncle, my great uncle, Gibson Kenner, he moved to Detroit. They say he moved to Detroit in the 20s. And the legend is that he killed a white man. He had to leave.
Right,
he had to leave Louisiana. However, he looked like he was white too. Okay? And he came to Detroit, as I understand it, either with his wife or shortly thereafter. She was black as night. She played his maid.
Right, sure.
They moved into a white neighborhood, right?
Sure.
All right, in the 20s. 20 years later, I'm born. My brother's born in 48, I'm born in 47.
Right.
My uncle was a sporting man. In other words, he was a gangster. All right. And he was a numbers man and a pretty successful one, And by the time I met my uncle or was conscious of him, the neighborhood that he lived in was starting to change. Right. In fact, some of the people that I went to school with, some of the black kids I went to school with lived in his neighborhood. Okay. But anyway, so he had a Cadillac. He bought a Cadillac, once a year or every 2 years, and he had a garage, and he had a garage opener, remote.
Right, true.
And me and my brother used to fight over who was going to open the garage. This is in the 50s, bro. And so he would come to visit with us, in Detroit. He lived in Detroit too. And after he would leave, the kids would come up and say, "Man, who's that white man?" I said, "That's my uncle." See, I don't know. I'm not checking this. I'm not at that point. I'm not checking any of this other stuff. The world has not crushed down on me yet. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But if he opened his mouth, then you knew where he was from.
Sure.
He couldn't put on. He didn't speak the King's English. Okay. Right. All right. So, but what he used to do, he would take my brother and I for rides. We'd sit in the back of his Cadillac, and this white man would be driving us around Detroit. And I always thought, what are people, now I think this, in retrospect, what were people thinking, who we were, and this white man, ostensibly white, was driving us around different places. That was the anecdote.
I think it's a real thing. I think, I bring it up, and part of the reason why I've told you before is that a lot of us, at least the people that I went to school with, there was a lot of question as to, who we were. You know what I mean? Like there was this mystery around who we were, and make us question ourselves, right? So we say, like in other words, where do I fit in?
Where you fit in, right?
In the American narrative. Now, my parents had their, they had their story, but what was not so clear for people that were in my, era was that because we were integrating everything at that time, what did that mean for us? And we didn't necessarily know. We're just coming to it now, meaning that we had to step away from it many, many years and then blink and Black Lives Matter happened. And now, okay, it's a clear line in terms of where we were, right? Back then, because we clearly weren't where these kids or where these young people are now, right? So the fact that they have been so strident, and the movement has even been bigger. And we did our own little thing, but we were dealing with a whole of okay, we're integrating the schools. So what does that mean, right? And as a result of that, what are we supposed to be getting?
Right.
What are we getting out of, okay, we go to these schools, we've done all the things that everybody says we're supposed to do. Does that mean that things are going to change for us, right? What is it that we get out of it, and what should we expect? And I think it's unclear. It's still unclear, but at least we know a little bit more than the generation, in some ways, than the generation before and exactly before. Sometimes I feel like we've lost a little bit of the grit that is required to keep a movement going. I think you understand what I'm saying, right?
Yeah, I get. You want grit? I give you some grit.
You know, like
grit.
You have it for a variety of reasons. My parents definitely have it for a variety of reasons. Their parents had it, but I think in terms of the integration, when we're on the front lines of integration, it gets, again, murky, right? It gets murky.
You asked the question before, and I didn't finish answering it.
Yeah.
Because you asked about the youth today, and if there was some things that they were lacking. I hate to use the word lacking, that they hadn't realized, hadn't
realized yet, right?
You know. Right. I'm in the same boat. Yeah, I think I'm a pretty smart guy. A friend of mine used to say, I've been around the world once and talked to everybody twice. You know? Yeah, me too. However, it's becoming abundantly clear to me now how organized our oppression was or is.
Sure.
You understand me?
Yes, yes.
You know, I mean, I'm saying, what? You know, I mean, of course I knew, you know, people talk about conspiracy theories, and I think they misuse the word. Of course people have conspiracies. That only means you talk to somebody else about something that's illegal. Go to law school, do whatever you have to do, but understand what you're saying, you know? They talked about this. They organized around it. They infiltrated every aspect of government, you know? They had a plan. The eugenics, the whole thing, you know, was organized. They conspired. They conspired successfully to deny us our rights on so many different levels.
And when you say they, do you believe it's I mean, or maybe the question is, when you say they, who is they? Is it the government?
I'm gonna tell you who they is. I'm gonna tell you they is the black nurse who helped conspire to infect those black men with syphilis.
Right. Yeah.
Co-conspirator.
So yeah.
You know, I don't have to ascribe a color to them.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
People involved in the oppression and
yeah, exactly. Yeah. No matter
who they
to
are.
what degree, who they are. Y'all right? I mentioned her for a reason. You know, I called her out for a reason because I've been reading reports about how she tried to justify, you know, this experiment, the Tuskegee experiments. Did you know that they did the same thing in Guatemala?
Yeah, look, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. And what's happening now, I think, is because of the internet. I mean, you and I would never have been able to have this conversation without it costing a lot of money, right? Because now we can get on Zoom it and talk, and as a result of what's happening in the world, you know, in terms of the medical issues, right. A lot of people are doing this, and the conversations are, you know, exponential now. People are talking about a whole bunch of things, right?
David, you know, listen, I can remember this like it was yesterday. You always had these black guys, you know, who dressed differently, who talked crazy in quotations. They're always talking about history and this and that and the pyramids and all kind of shit that we thought were, you know, this guy's crazy. Like in the spirit of Richard Pryor, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
He's crazy, you know? They were always there. They were wearing turbans and whatever it was, they were strange, but they knew. They had figured some things out, you know?
that the common person didn't know, and they would talk about it. And
they would talk. Yeah, right. We should do a movie like that. You know, you know what I mean? You know, they were there. They'd been there. When Julius Caesar when he burnt the Library of Alexandria. Don't think for a minute that some people didn't retain some of that knowledge. You understand? And was trying to tell people, "Oh man, get out of here." You know, hey, we've been faced with that also. The total obliteration of history, you know, of many different peoples. All right, you know, by hook and by crook. That takes a toll on things. Sure. All right, but some things kind of seep through. They seep through. So we had some people. There were some people. I saw them in my neighborhood. You know what I mean? You know, you'd see them, and I didn't learn that. Listen, I was in the 7th grade before I knew that George Washington had slaves.
Right.
I didn't realize it until then. It was out there, but I was in a Catholic school, so and the nuns order was founded by a black nun from Haiti.
Yeah, sure.
I didn't know that until a couple of years ago. All right.
Right.
You know, so they had a system of masking things hundreds of years ago. They had to justify some things. One thing I do remember then was they were talking about the South America, and someone did say in the recounting of the history, the Spanish asked, "Who built this? You know, who built this?" You don't know? You don't know? So if you don't know, I mean, the guy who's asking the question.
Sure.
So what is that saying? You know? But then I forgot that, but then I remembered, after I'm reading, I said, yeah, that's right. I knew that. But you're bombarded with so much negativity, so much incorrect information that you can't even think straight. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
They put you down so much and get this other narrative out here and work it, hone it to the nth degree, and so consequently, you're a non-entity.
Yeah.
Ralph Ellison, the Invisible Man. I mean.
Let me ask you real quick. When you were growing up in Detroit, let's say you grew up as a teenager there, and then you went to
Inkster. I was about 13, 14 when I went to Inkster.
Yeah. And in terms of college, or university, or you were at the music?
I was at the conservatory from the time I was 8 years old.
So what was your experience like? Now, in other words, how did you experience racism straight on? And how were you prepared, or if you were prepared? I mean, was it just from your parents, your grandmother telling you about what was going on that you started to change, or at least open or see with more clarity what was coming down the pike? You understand what I mean? Like, so when did things started really becoming clear for you about the disparity and the way that people were treated?
Don't forget, now I'm 73 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I just turned 73 this month.
Mm-hmm.
I have the honor.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. I have the honor. It wasn't easy getting here, but I made it, You got to remember, we're talking about the 50s now.
Okay.
We're talking about the girls getting bombed,
Mm-hmm.
in the church. We're talking about the dogs being set on people, the Selma marches. Like I said, my first inkling was around Emmett Till, but I really didn't understand. I wasn't intellectually understanding all of that. But by the time we get to 56, I'm on the road, bro. My mother bought an encyclopedia.
Okay, here you go.
She bought an encyclopedia.
Uh-huh.
And every year they had a yearbook.
Right.
Every year. I used to read the yearbook from cover to cover.
All right, I understand.
All right, so I knew about geopolitical shit. Now, I'm not saying I didn't have my doctorate. I'm not saying this,
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is I had some feel for it. So when you ask me when is this impacting on me, I knew about colonialism. I knew about South Africa, in the 50s.
Right. But in terms of your day-to-day, let's just say when you're out, you're like going to the store. Like, so for example, I remember stories of my grandmother not being able to go to Hutzler's or whatever the store was in Baltimore. She talked about that constantly. It's sort of like, you know, grilled in my head, right? Or I remember my father would tell me that he had a job on the bus and they tried to say that he stole money from the till. Right? I mean, and the way that the information comes out about my family and sort of what they went through, it never comes out in a neat fashion. It always kind of, boop, it pops out. And then
exactly. Because they don't discuss that with you. You know, until you're a man now. You're a man now. Now you get it.
Then you know, now I have my own stories, right? Like now I have. And sometimes when I would share my stories with my parents, they would look at me, I think, the way that I looked at them when I was telling them, or when they were telling me about their stories. You understand what I mean? Like, so they thought that, okay, what they went through was more difficult, right? When we started, you know, sharing some of the things that were going on with us in our era, where we were living it firsthand, I'm sure that they were quite shocked as well because they just weren't expecting it. And I guess my question to you is that your firsthand things that started happening to you directly, where you could then reference all of the stuff that you learning through the books and through your grandparents and your parents and things.
Well, there's one element I didn't introduce into this. I was a paper boy in the 50s into the 60s. And so not only is it on television or on the radio, whatever it is, I don't care. You know, like for instance, I was a paper boy when Floyd Patterson was defeated by Ingemar Johansson.
Okay, yeah, sure.
That rocked my world. You know, I get to, and that I think that particular fight might have been in Sweden. I'm not sure. They had one in Sweden and one in the United States. But anyway, I had the paper in my hand, you know. Ingemar Johansson defeats Floyd Patterson. You know, well, this is before Muhammad Ali, before, you know, Sonny Liston and all of that, you know. And I'm following boxing because we had Pass Blue Ribbon and the Gillette thing going on. And I saw Rocky Marciano knock Joe Louis out on television. I saw that. Okay.
Okay.
Oh, this is what we're talking about here.
Yeah, sure.
Right? You know, so you know, even then, but you're asking about this one moment. I feel what you're asking.
In other words, like it all comes together for you because you can hear other people's stories, right? And you kind of, but it's nothing like the first time.
Okay.
Hear whatever is coming out of the person's mouth directly toward you. I mean, I can tell you when somebody called me a nigger, I remember freezing and not knowing what to say because it was a shock. And it was in Maryland. It was not New Jersey when we had moved. There were a handful of Black folks in this school out in the, not suburbs, in the country in Maryland at the time. I only was there for a year. And all of them seemed to be cousins, or related, loosely related, right? And I told two of the Black guys what had happened, and they went out the back door running after the guy. Like that's how that was the experience. And minutes later, I was called into the principal's office. That was the experience. And it was one of the first where, because before in Baltimore, almost everybody, well, it was integrated, but it was so much, there's so many of us that wasn't a big deal, right? So when we moved out to the country, then things started to have a different feel, right? And it was as if I could not recapture my innocence. I don't want to call it that. I don't want to go as far as saying it's innocence, but you know what I'm saying. It was like,
I know exactly
from that point on, it was like a wound that just continued to be open, and that I had to be cognizant, if that's the right word, on guard,
Mhm.
from that point on, right? So it's one thing to see it, right? But it's another thing to experience it, right? Like if you get stopped on, by the cops and something goes down, or
Well,
if you are, this kind of thing.
it's kind of like an unfair question because,
Uh-huh.
because if you ask a 5-year-old today,
Uh-huh.
yeah, well, what was his first experience, with racism? He might say, George Floyd. You know what
Okay.
I'm saying? In
Yes.
fact, there are a couple of parents who come on and on the internet, black parents saying, "This is my son. He's hiding. There's this one. I'm going to send it to you where here comes the police car coming down the street, and the young boy was playing basketball in his yard, and he hides behind the truck and lets
Yeah.
him go on. He's about 8 years old."
Yeah.
So he's already been
It's already
conditioned.
through it. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So for me, now that's a stark. George Floyd is a stark incident. It's like Emmett Till. To a certain extent.
Mm-hmm.
But that really wasn't my moment because I didn't understand it. I can't add that, but I knew it. I heard the name. But it's for me. It was a combination. It just was building up.
Uh-huh.
It
I
was
understand.
it was on the upswing. It was
I
just
get it.
building.
Uh-huh.
Intensifying. So like I said, '60s was. I mean, the '50s. That was a turbulent period. You've got the ban the bomb. I was hip to the ban the bomb movement.
And the
Duck.
bomb.
Yeah, ban the bomb.
Oh, ban
Yeah.
the bomb, the bomb, right? Is that what
The
you're saying?
bomb,
Yeah,
yeah.
the bomb,
I don't,
atomic
I
bomb.
don't know I don't know no other bomb. What bomb are you talking about? No,
What's
seriously.
interesting is that
Yeah.
I'm 53 and you turned
73.
73. My parents were born in 39. So I don't, we missed, or my father was not a part of your generation. So the thing about Vietnam, which I should ask before we go very long, because I could do another interview. I mean, right now we've just talked about race. We talked about race.
We haven't gone anywhere.
We haven't gotten as farther as I would like, but I would say this, that since you're younger than my father, like a lot of the information that you're talking about, I didn't necessarily experience or hear a lot about.
But you know
I heard
about it.
about
Duck and
Vietnam.
cover. Duck and cover. You know
Right,
about duck and cover.
or I think my mother's younger brother is
Yeah.
closer to your age, or if
Yeah.
not the same age. But it's interesting. I think my point in having the conversation with you is I wanted to get out to the audience, just your experience in terms of coming up in Detroit, how you grew up,
Right.
where your family came from. You migrated from Louisiana, which I remember you telling me, but it was
I was born in Detroit. My parents
were born in Detroit, but your ancestors from Louisiana, which you had mentioned in the previous conversation, but I had forgotten. And I think it's important for people, particularly Black people, all people really, to hear the stories, different stories from Black Americans, because it's still not clear. It's still not clear what our deal is, particularly around the world. And when you move to Berlin, I'm just going to jump. So you've been to Germany several times.
That's a quantum leap.
It's a quantum leap, but we'll go back. I just a quick.
Yeah.
You've been in Germany for 40 years. What brought you to Germany, and how'd you manage to stay in Germany for 40 years? I mean, what was the situation that brought you there?
Well, it's I'm in this movie. I'm in several movies. I mean, documentaries. And one of them is called Wallenstein, this documentarische Inszenierung, the documentary, that adaptation of a work from the German equivalent of Shakespeare, Friedrich Schiller. And it's a story about a soldier who becomes the field marshal of this army, but he's so bad to his troops that in the end, it's in the 30 Years War from this 30 Years War from 1618 to 1638, I think it is, and 1648, excuse me, and he eventually gets assassinated by his troops because he's just a just a horrible person. And I have to say why I went into the Army. And I just give you the one line. I fell in love, she broke my heart, and I had to get away.
Nice. Okay. All right.
Yeah, I mean, there are millions of those stories around. You know,
Sure.
there's nothing. There's nothing unusual about that scenario.
Right, no.
You know?
But obviously,
but wait, yeah.
But obviously, something about you. I mean, you know, people say, "Well, David, you're still in Switzerland. Are you going to go back?"
In Germany.
No,
oh,
I
you.
mean, for me, yeah. Are you going back
right.
to the United States? That question comes up a lot, and I'm sure it came up for you. You know, when you're there, and then you move, and people, are you coming back, or like what's? And I think for a lot of people that are overseas, away from their home of origin, right? So
Well,
I guess
yeah. For me, see, I have a slightly different view of things.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my thing is beyond the planet in a certain sense. I'm not tied to any of this. You know, I mean, I'm not tied to any particular piece of dirt on this planet. For me, the planet is mine. You know, like my brother, he would say that the earth is my house. And I agree with him, and it has many different rooms. I'll go to any room on this planet when I get ready. Nobody's going to dictate to me or tell me that I belong just in this room. You know, I've been many places on the planet, and by and large, I've been welcomed with open arms, right? That's I was going to get into something else, but we're going to have time to get into what I was going to just say later.
Okay.
But I go back. I'm getting ready to do this movie. I love where I'm from.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. You know, I miss it. I've got my family there. They're craving for me to come back, and I'm craving to see them. All of those things, all the things that you feel. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I'm not running away from the United States, but I got grandchildren over here. I've got, my children are here. Have a life over here.
Sure,
I have history over here. And I'm doing a lot of work over here.
Uh-huh.
And but I don't feel like I have to rush home to prove something.
I understand. I understand.
However, the government doesn't want me there. I've been extradited from 2 continents, from Vietnam, from Asia, and from where I sit right now. I mean, in Germany, I've been extradited and brought back to the States, And so some people might say he's in exile, And I have another project. It's called Exile and Blues, or Blues in Exile. You know what I'm saying? And that's you. You're in exile, and it's to a certain extent. Is it blues in exile, or is it exile and blues?
I will tell you this, though. There are a lot of people that don't realize what you just said, right? So I would position, that's a conversation for another time, but I understand exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, right. We see. So, am I going back? Hell yeah, I'm going back. But they don't want to see me. I mean, some people do not. The authorities don't want to see me back there at all. Because given my history and given what I'm about, maybe I'll hook it, or maybe I'll plug into something that they definitely don't like. I'll bring attention to something. I know they don't want me to make this movie I'm getting ready to make, given certain conditions. You have to raise funds and what have you. But that's another story. But what's happening today, and we talked about many different things, and I don't see how you're going to be able to not do another interview.
We will have to do, because right now the whole idea, and we talked about this. We've been emailing back and forth, and I said I got to outline something, because there's a lot here, right? Just in terms of the conversation that I had with Lori, your friend and my colleague here. I said, there's too much to cover. Like, even when we were all on the phone, that I said, you know what, I gotta figure that out, right? Let me just figure it out. But for this particular conversation, I think we talked about issues of race, right? That's clear. And I think sort of how it relates to you as you were growing up. when you knew, or I was asking when you found out, like sort of what was your moment, and sort of how you got to Germany, and sort of, I guess what you're explaining now is how people, or how the government might be seeing you, or people that are, you know, in the government now might be seeing you when you go back, right? So being in exile or being away, right?
Right.
Do you feel like, I mean, even if all of those things didn't happen, right? Whatever, and we can discuss it in detail later, but did you feel like you had to leave the United States? And if so, why did you feel that way?
I have a song. It's called "Oh No." I gotta pack my bags and go.
Uh-huh.
One verse is faded photos of family and friends. If you ask me, don't you know I'd do it again? You know, and one line was, I never seen a bus stop that I would die in. You know,
Mm.
I'm a mover, bro. You know, I like to move. You know, and you know, it's hard to answer that question because, of course, you have a longing, you know, to be around your friends. I could go back home, you know, and fit in, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a role for me there. There's no question about that. And I try to give as much back to my home as I can. And I'm you know, I'm on the edge of my chair now trying to get back.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can't ask me, do I want to go back, you know, if I'm going back, because I'm trying to get back there right now. You know,
Uh-huh.
listen, I'm trying to do a movie, and the way back to Europe is difficult because they don't let Americans back in.
Right, yeah, sure.
My only salvation is the fact that, you know, I'm married. I have
Right.
children over here. And even then they might, you know, throw something up in the game.
Sure,
You
sure.
understand what I might
Yeah.
be stuck in Detroit. You know,
Sure.
this whole, you know, this whole conversation might be academic. You know what I'm saying? You know,
Yeah.
in that
Now's not a
regard.
good time to try to go back to the United States,
But I
given
got
the
to go.
situation. Yeah.
But I got to go.
Uh-huh.
I want to be there to record the sentiments, you know, the whole atmosphere of going into October through the election, if there's going to be one. And
Well, you
here,
know what, you brought something up, because people may be on vacation now, and I'll tell you in another video how I feel about vacation, because
yeah,
vacation, I agree with you that you have to keep moving, right? That's a big thing. And what I don't like is that people relax during the summer months, but that's when all the things start to pop off. So all of the planning even happens before vacation, right? So
right.
even like the summer months, June, July, and August,
Mm-hmm.
somewhere, someplace, they're making some big plans to happen and unroll in September, October, November, right? We've just seen a lot of it, you know, in the last 20 years, even more so
Mm-hmm.
in the United States, since 9/11. I mean, my reference point is 9/11. And my thing when I was in New York is I would get angry because people would be chilling too hard, and I couldn't
Oh
make
yeah,
any money during the summer, right? So
right.
that's always been my thing. And
Right.
now that I've seen things unroll, I
Mm-hmm.
know something's going on now. So in other words, I feel you when you say I need to get back there, and you are right, because it is probably going to be bigger than the two things that have happened so far with this medical issue worldwide and the Black Lives Matter protest. What is about to happen September, October, November
Mm-hmm.
is going to blow everybody's mind. That's just my gut.
And just imagine this, you know, over the last 20 years, you know, 911, Epstein,
Yeah.
Jolene Maxwell,
It's just a
uh,
lot. It's a lot. It's a
COVID-19,
lot. It's a lot. It's a
you
lot.
know,
It's a
the
lot to
first,
deal with.
the guy said the other day, the first wave, you know, they were talking about the second wave, and the
Right,
doctor said,
right, right, right. It's just too
forget
much.
about that.
Yeah.
We ain't through the first wave yet. You understand me? You did? Oh yeah, one other thing. My
Uh-huh.
grandmother, this is one of my grandmother moments. And I used to talk to my grandmother a lot. She came to stay with us, you know.
Mm.
We had an extra room. We call it Grandma's room. It used to be
Uh-huh.
Uncle Al's room. Then it became Grandma's room. You know, nobody slept in that room but my uncle and my grandma, you know.
Uh-huh.
And so one day, I was a young boy. She says, she starts talking about the Spanish flu,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And I hadn't thought about that. Before this crisis, it was just a faint memory in the dark recesses of my mind. But when this came about, I thought about this conversation I had with her and how, and there again, one of these moments where she kind of like, suspended animation and she started talking about this flu.
Mm-hmm.
There's some remarkable stories there. And there's some remarkable parallels, between now and then. America lost 650,000 people to the flu.
Yeah, yeah.
Almost 700,000. Between 50, depending on who you talk to, between 50 and 100 million died. With
Yeah,
a population, with a world population of only 2 billion. Do the arithmetic. And they wore masks.
Mm.
They were much more into wearing masks. They didn't have to fight with anybody about wearing their masks. They were tearing up underwear, putting,
Right, sure.
trying to get a mask on. So there's so many challenges that we face here. The Fukushima,
Mm-hmm.
300 tons.
Huge.
Yeah, I mean, that's not even on the radar.
Yeah, it's huge.
You're gonna start glowing in a minute. Take another drink of water.
Mm-hmm.
We have so many challenges here, and now they selected, they just buffaloed everybody into this guy Biden. I always thought a convention was there so you could throw the issues out and there would be some infighting and everybody would be trying to be the candidate. You'd have some drama, but no, they decided for you who's just going to be your candidate. You can't vote for Trump. So they buffalo people. It's a whole thing that's deteriorating. It's falling apart, and it's, who knows? There's so many things that could happen. There's so many things that are up for grabs. And as I said, in the treatment, I talked about there could be a coup d'etat, and all of a sudden, preposterous is a possibility.
You're talking about the treatment of the film.
My movie, right? Yeah. I don't know if you've read it yet.
Well, no. Well, tell everybody, because we're going long. We've gone long. Tell everybody, because we have to do another part where we
got to do it
because right now the idea was to give people an introduction of who you are, right, and sort of give a background of what you're interested in. Tell the audience your current project, what you're interested in doing, and how it connects to what we just talked about the moments before.
Well, it's hopefully going to be realized. There are a lot of factors involved in terms of realizing the project. In fact, my first film documentary is called Street of Dreams. And once I finished it, I was surprised to find out that most people who get money for films never make them, which was inconceivable to me. I got some money for a film. I want to make this film, you know what I mean? But that's not the reality out there. A lot of times people get a budget and they never finish for a lot of reasons that I can understand now, And in fact, we got a sum of money to do it from the Berlin Film Foundation and for the first film. And when people saw it, they said we should have gotten 3 times the amount of money that we got for finishing, for doing the film. So I understand there's some problems with funding, some problems with the budget. All those things can mean you don't do the film. I got that, yeah, right? Now, this next film, it just wants to document the atmosphere, the rarefied atmosphere that exists right now, the challenges that we all face with the corona, the pandemic, with the election situation, with Donald Trump, with the Republican and the Democratic Party, within 6 square miles. Just imagine a place which was the second to last stop of the Underground Railroad, which is the specter of that is hanging over it. We have people who migrated from the South, over hundreds of years, fleeing slavery and then maybe fleeing Jim Crow too. I want to tell that story. I want to know what's on these people's minds. I want to hear what they have to say. I want to see what the conditions are. All of those things. And I want to be there. If there's going to be an election, I want to be there to see what people are talking about, and I want to see the aftermath. And our working title, excuse me, our working title right now, it was I changed it. Now it's No End in Sight, because that's how I see it.
Mm-hmm.
There's no light at the end of this tunnel. There probably will be, but not right now.
No. It's too many things.
Excuse me.
Too many things. There's too many things that are trying to work itself out. And I will tell you this. Maybe one of the reasons why I was able to put this show together, or these, the interviews, was that I don't even necessarily know. Well, I know certain things. I have certain beliefs, but I just, when I would watch the news, I'm like, well, I don't know if I have an opinion on that, right? And I think part of it is that I've been numb to what my own thoughts are about the situation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So part of why I think it's good to have people like yourself and other people interview is I want to hear what other people think. And this is what, when I was in college, we would be in one area, we called it, it was a low rise, or the Du Bois College House. We would debate until 3, 4 o'clock in the morning and sit around and talk. And so a lot of that, I don't have, and so many other people don't have it either, right? So I think it's important to have the dialogue, to talk to people that you wouldn't necessarily, speak to on a regular basis. That opportunity did exist many, many years ago in different ways, different forms. And because of technology in the situation, we've moved away from it. And it's my goal to kind of pull that back in.
You're doing a great job. I like your style. It's a difficult thing to do, to keep something going. I've been faced with that, keep it interesting, and I really appreciate the opportunity to sit here with you and discuss different things. We're having a lot of fun, things are serious, but at the same time, we can still, have fun doing it,
Right.
enjoy. Maybe I shouldn't say have fun, enjoy it.
People have said that, so it's not like you're the only one that's saying it, because it's like, hey, look.
You mean I'm not the only one?
No, people come on thinking I'm going to I don't know what they think I'm going to do, but at the end they say, wait a minute, that was fun, right?
Yeah.
And people, you miss, I think people aren't having the kind of fun, right, that they used to have.
Right, yeah, man. Yeah,
right?
I'm in my element with you.
Right. I mean, look, and when I was back in the day, I used to hang sort of like what you were talking about. I mean, I could hang, and I know what it's like to kind of, let's go here, let's go here. Now, I haven't done that in a long time. I haven't done it in a long time, right? But I still have it in me,
right?
So even though we're sitting here on the computer.
You're 53 years old, bro.
I'm 53. I will be 53 in October, at the end of October.
Yeah, where the wrinkles at?
Well, the wrinkles are here. It's just not up close. It's not up close.
Yeah.
It's not up close,
Yeah.
And look, I'm very thankful, at least, when I was younger, I looked, when I was in college, I looked 13, and that wasn't so great, right? So
no, that wasn't. That
wasn't great.
They were calling the police.
That worked against me. But anyway, look, I'm gonna let you go. We'll talk again. We will connect and make sure that I get the right bio and position this the right way.
You see, we got to get there.
Right. So Vietnam veterans against the war, old school
sappers.
Sappers. And what is this? What is a sapper?
A sapper is somebody who throws like Bangalore torpedoes over barbed wire. Somebody, a demolition expert.
Okay. All right.
I mean, we mean that figuratively, of course.
All right.
Everybody know what a sapper is.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Well, look, you have a good evening. We'll touch base again, and we'll put this together and upload it and see what happens. Yeah,
man. Hey.
All right.
Yeah. And let me just do a plug for your program. It's a very necessary thing to get the various and sundry ideas and comments from people around the world. We live in trying times, and it's a good thing to have Brother David here doing this bit here. It takes preparation. You've got to have concentration, and you got a vision. And so support this brother. Make sure that you like his site, thumbs up, all of
Thumbs
those
up,
things. Everything. Put, send him some funds to keep this going.
Hey, look,
Yeah.
and
Supporting.
some of the people on YouTube, they got a whole system going on now. In other words, I've been watching people and loving their stuff, right? I'm like,
Yeah.
my God, these people are great. And
Yeah.
then when this pandemic happened, and then I said, hey, wait a minute, I think this is time. I think I can do this, And it may take time, but it will be all right. Thank you very much for.
I'm waiting for number 2, part 2, 3, and 4.
We're going to do it. We're going to do it.
Right.
I think, I'm going to get back to you. Give me the whole weekend to think about it, because I have some thoughts, even as we're about to close, about the importance of our discussion and why it should be heard, right? Why it should be heard, because it really is a record. It's a record of a person who's experienced a certain history. And that history is related specifically to where we're coming from in the United States, right? I mean, that is part of the motivation. Not the entire, but part of it. I mean, it's important. Most of the people I've interviewed have been American.
Except me.
Well, except you.
See, because I'm not an American.
You were born in America.
I was born in America.
That's right. All right.
That one quote.
Yes.
And I said in an interview, if John Wayne is an American, I'm not American.
No.
Nah, there it is.
Hey, look, well, my position is this, even though I'm in Switzerland. Because John Wayne is no longer here, today is our opportunity to define or redefine what American means, right? So before, I don't even think that would ever come out of my mouth. But I think I've had some experiences that make me realize, okay, when and if I go back to the United States, exactly how I'm going to do the thing, right? Whereas before I didn't know, right? It was clear. It wasn't clear.
Right.
And I'm like, what is going on? Like, where am I? Now, if by chance I'm back there, I know how to do the damn thing. Now, that took many, many years, right? Where I could even say, oh, I'm American, it would never come out of my mouth. Never.
I know what you mean. I know what you mean.
Right? But, being here, it's easy, right? Because nobody has any reference about what's happening there. But I now know how to do, I now know how I would do it.
Yeah, well, let's do it from Antarctica up to the polar cap. Let's make them all Americans.
Just do it, right? But before, it's like, should I do it? Can I do it? Am I doing it? All these questions come up. I have enough information now. Anyway,
I wish you all the success and luck, in the world. But,
thank you, and we'll talk again. Thank you. Have a great weekend. The rest of your weekend.
Tell your partner, your lady there, you keep looking over at her.
Well, there's nobody here. I'm looking at the phone.
You're looking at the phone.
It's just me. Anyway.
Okay. All right.
All right. We'll take care. We'll talk.
You and them chickens.
Now,
if you didn't understand that, somebody in the audience will.
Nah, it's just me. It's just me. Have a good one, right? We'll be
okay. Look that up.
All right.
Look it up.
All right.
Me and them chickens. Just me and them chickens. Look that up. All right.
See you. Yes.
Take it easy.
Take care.